London, 1815. Violet Treswick's fingers trembled as she clutched the letter to her chest. The flimsy parchment, the very instrument of her demise, bore her father's hasty scrawl, the ink still fresh enough to smudge beneath her tears. "It is done," he had written from the gambling hall. "Your hand is promised to Viscount Ironwood. The marriage settles my debts. Be ready by Thursday next." Thursday next. For days hence. The morning light filtering through the faded curtains of their once grand townhouse mocked her with its cheerfulness. Violet pressed a hand to the window, watching a pair of young ladies stroll arm in arm down the street, giggling behind their fans. How she had once been like them, carefree, secure, with prospects as bright as the ribbons in their hair. Now, at 18, she was to be sold like chattel to a man whose reputation made even the most hardened members of the ton whisper behind their gloves. "Miss Violet." Her maid Martha appeared at the doorway, her face pinched with concern. "Your father has returned. He's asking for you in the study." Violet straightened her spine, tucked the offending letter into her pocket, and arranged her features into what she hoped resembled composure. "Thank you, Martha. I shall attend him directly." The study, once her favorite refuge with its walls of books and comfortable chairs, now felt like a prisoner's dock. Her father stood by the fireplace, his cravat askew, his eyes bloodshot from a night of gaming and spirits. "Ah, there you are, my girl." He attempted a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I trust you received my correspondence." "Yes, father." Violet's voice remained steady though her heart pounded like a runaway carriage. "You have sold me to Viscount Ironwood to settle your gambling debts." Lord Treswick flinched. "Such dramatics, Violet." "I have secured you an excellent match. The Viscount is wealthy beyond measure, with estates in 3 counties. You shall want for nothing. Except perhaps kindness? Affection? The basic courtesies one might expect from a husband." Violet rarely permitted herself such impertinence, but desperation loosened her tongue. Her father's face darkened. "You speak of matters you cannot understand. This family stands on the precipice of ruin. Would you have us cast into the streets? Your mother's jewelry pawned? Your brothers withdrawn from school?" He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "The Viscount has agreed to pay all my debts in exchange for your hand. The matter is settled. They say he drove his first wife to an early grave," Violet whispered. Lord Treswick waved a dismissive hand. "Gossip and hearsay. Lady Ironwood died in childbed, as many women do. It is unfortunate but hardly sinister." "And the rumors of his temper? His cruelty to servants? The mistresses he keeps openly in town?" "Enough." Her father slammed his palm against the mantelpiece. "You will marry Viscount Ironwood on Thursday next. The special license has been obtained. Your trousseau, modest though it must be, is being prepared. I suggest you spend the intervening days practicing gratitude rather than rebellion." Violet felt the last of her hope crumble like ash. "Yes, father," she murmured, cursing the tears that threatened to fall. "The Viscount will call tomorrow to make your acquaintance." Lord Treswick's tone softened slightly. "He is not so very old, Violet. Only 35. And he is not without attractions." "I shall endeavor to find them," she replied, dropping into a perfect curtsy before fleeing the room. Viscount Ezra Ironwood was indeed not without attractions, Violet conceded the following afternoon as he bowed over her hand in the parlor. Tall and broad-shouldered, with raven hair streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, he cut an imposing figure in his perfectly tailored coat of midnight blue. His features were patrician, high forehead, aquiline nose, firmly set jaw, and might have been called handsome were it not for the coldness in his grey eyes. "Miss Treswick." His voice was deep, cultured, and entirely devoid of warmth. "I find myself pleased with your father's description. You will make a suitable viscountess." "Suitable?" "As one might describe a horse at auction or a piece of furniture." "You honor me, my lord," Violet responded with practiced civility, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. I have brought a token of our engagement. He produced a velvet box from his pocket and opened it with efficiency rather than ceremony. The ring inside was ostentatious, a massive ruby surrounded by diamonds that would surely weigh down her slender finger. It spoke of wealth rather than sentiment, possession rather than affection. It belonged to my grandmother, he said as he slipped it onto her finger without asking permission to do so. All Viscountesses Ironwood have worn it. Including his first wife, Violet thought with a shiver. It is magnificent, she managed, the weight of it already feeling like a shackle. I have preparations to make at Ironwood Hall. You will join me there directly after the ceremony. His gaze traveled over her with the detached assessment of a man inspecting property. I require an heir, Miss Treswick. I trust you understand your primary duty as my wife. Violet felt heat rise to her cheeks. To speak so boldly of such matters during a first meeting. I understand the responsibilities of marriage, my lord. Good. Then we need not waste time on unnecessary sentimentality. He checked his pocket watch. I must take my leave. I have an appointment at my club. As he rose to depart, a commotion at the front door drew their attention. The butler's voice rose in protest, followed by a deeper voice insisting on entry. I apologize for the intrusion, Lord Ironwood, Violet's father said, hurrying into the parlor. It appears we have an unexpected visitor. The parlor door burst open, and a young man strode in, his riding clothes dusty from the road, his chestnut hair windblown. Preston! Violet exclaimed, forgetting herself entirely as she rose to her feet. Preston Ingram, her childhood friend and neighbor from their country estate in Hampshire, swept an elegant if hasty bow. Forgive the interruption, he said, though his eyes, warm brown and sparkling with determination, suggested he was not sorry at all. I've only just received word of Miss Treswick's upcoming nuptials and wish to offer my congratulations in person. The Viscount's face remained impassive, but Violet did not miss how his hand tightened around his walking stick. How enthusiastic of you, Mr. Ingram, my lord. Preston Ingram. Miss Treswick and I have been acquainted since childhood. Indeed, the Viscount replied coldly. Well, your congratulations are acknowledged. Now if you'll excuse me, I have pressing business. As Lord Ironwood departed with Lord Treswick escorting him, Preston moved closer to Violet, lowering his voice urgently. Is it true? You are to marry that cold fish in 3 days' time. Preston, you shouldn't have come, Violet whispered, though her heart leapt at the sight of him. Yes, it is true. The marriage will settle my father's debts. Preston's expression darkened. So he sells his daughter to save his pride? Vi, you cannot go through with this. The Viscount's reputation, I have no choice, she interrupted, glancing nervously at the door. My family's future depends on it. There must be another way. He took her hands impulsively, then noticed the enormous ruby weighing down her finger. His face fell. So it is official. It is. The sound of footsteps in the hallway forced them apart. Preston stepped back, his expression resolving into one of determination. This is not finished, Violet. I will not stand by and watch you sacrifice yourself. Before she could respond, her father returned, his expression thunderous. Mr. Ingram, I believe you have overstayed your welcome. My daughter is betrothed to Viscount Ironwood. Any prior attachments must now be forgotten. Preston bowed stiffly. Of course, Lord Treswick. I merely wish to pay my respects. He turned to Violet, his eyes conveying a message she dared not interpret. Miss Treswick, I wish you every happiness. As he turned to leave, he fumbled with his pocket watch, dropping it near Violet's feet. Clumsy of me, he muttered, bending to retrieve it. As he rose, he pressed a folded note into her palm with such discretion that even her watchful father did not notice. After Preston's departure, Lord Treswick fixed his daughter with a severe look. I hope you harbour no foolish notions regarding that young man. Mr. Ingram may be the son of a baronet, but his fortune is modest at best. He could never save this family from ruin. I harbour no notions at all, father, Violet replied, the note burning in her hand like a coal. "If you'll excuse me, I believe I should rest before dinner." In the privacy of her chamber, Violet unfolded Preston's hasty scrawl, *midnight tonight. "The garden gate. Bring only what you can carry. We will find another way. Her heart thundered in her chest. Escape? With Preston? The very idea was scandalous, ruinous, and yet, the alternative was a lifetime shackle to a man who viewed her as nothing more than breeding stock and a symbol of his wealth. As Violet paced her room, weighing impossible choices, she did not notice the shadow that passed her window, nor did she see the figure slipping away from the house, a purloined copy of Preston's note clutched in gloved hands. The garden gate creaked softly as Violet approached it at the stroke of midnight, a small valise clutched in her trembling hands. The moon, nearly full, cast long shadows across the overgrown pathways that had once been her mother's pride before illness claimed her 3 years prior. "Preston," she whispered into the darkness. A figure emerged from behind the ancient oak tree, but it was not Preston's familiar silhouette that greeted her. Instead, Viscount Ironwood stepped into the moonlight, his expression glacial. "What a disappointment I must be, Miss Treswick," he said, his voice cutting through the night air. "Were you expecting someone else? Your impetuous young friend, perhaps?" Violet's blood turned to ice. "Lord Ironwood. I was merely taking some air before retiring." Fully dressed, with a valise, at midnight. He raised an eyebrow. "I had hoped for a bride with more skill in deception, if deception was to be attempted." "How did you know of your planned elopement?" He withdrew a folded paper from his waistcoat, Preston's note. "Your maid was most cooperative when presented with a few sovereigns. A lesson for you, my dear, loyalty is rarely given, it must be purchased." Violet's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Where is Preston?" "Mr. Ingram is currently enjoying the hospitality of my footman in the alley behind your house. They are explaining, in terms even a lovesick puppy can understand, the consequences of interfering with my property." "I am not your property." Violet's fear gave way to indignation. "Not yet, perhaps, but you will be in 2 days' time." The Viscount stepped closer, and moonlight revealed a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Let me be perfectly clear, Miss Treswick. I have paid handsomely for the privilege of making you my wife. I will not be deprived of my purchase because of some childish infatuation." "It is not infatuation," Violet whispered, thinking of Preston's kind eyes, his gentle laugh, the way he had always seen her as a person of value rather than a commodity. "Whatever it is, it ends tonight." The Viscount's tone left no room for argument. "You will marry me as planned, or your father will face debtor's prison and your family will be cast into the street. Is that understood?" Violet nodded mutely, tears blurring her vision. "Good. Now return to your room. I have stationed a man outside your window for the remainder of the night." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Miss Treswick? Should you harbor any further thoughts of escape, remember this, what I have paid for, I keep. By any means necessary." As Violet crept back to her room, her hopes as shattered as her pride, she wondered how she might survive a lifetime bound to such a man. The ruby ring felt heavier than ever on her finger, its blood-red stone a perfect emblem of the sacrifice demanded of her. The morning of Violet's wedding dawned grey and drizzling, as if even the heavens mourned her fate. She sat motionless at her dressing table as Martha arranged her hair with shaking hands. "There now, miss," the maid said, attempting cheerfulness. "You look beautiful. The Viscount will be pleased." Violet met her own gaze in the mirror. She did look beautiful, in a way. The ivory silk of her wedding gown complemented her pale skin, and the pearls at her throat, borrowed from a sympathetic aunt, lent a soft glow to her face. But her green eyes were dull, and no amount of pinching could bring color to her cheeks. "Have you heard anything of Mr. Ingram?" Violet asked quietly. Martha's hands faltered in their work. "Only that he was found in an alley 2 nights ago, miss. Badly beaten, they say. His father has taken him back to Hampshire to recover." Violet closed her eyes against fresh pain. Poor Preston, suffering for his loyalty to her. At least he was alive. She had feared worse from the Viscount's men. A knock at the door announced her father. "It is time, Violet," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Perhaps even he, in his desperation to save himself, recognized the magnitude of what he was asking of his only daughter. The small chapel attached to St. George's was mercifully dim, with only a handful of witnesses present. Most of the ton had not been invited to this hasty affair, though rumors would surely spread by evening. Violet walked down the aisle on her father's arm, feeling more like a sacrifice approaching the altar than a bride. Viscount Ironwood stood waiting, resplendent in formal attire, his expression one of satisfaction rather than joy. As Lord Treswick placed Violet's hand in the Viscount's cold grip, she thought she might faint from despair. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient words and solemn promises. Violet spoke her vows mechanically, each while driving another nail into the coffin of her hopes. When the Viscount slid the gold band onto her finger to join the ruby monstrosity, his grip tightened painfully, a subtle reminder of their midnight conversation. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar intoned. "You may kiss your bride." The Viscount's lips descended upon hers in a brief, passionless press that felt more like a seal on a contract than a lover's first kiss. It was, Violet supposed, precisely that. The wedding breakfast was a subdued affair at a private dining room in Claridge's, paid for by the Viscount as a final courtesy to his new in-laws. Violet barely touched her food, responding to congratulations with practiced smiles that never reached her eyes. "We depart for Ironwood Hall within the hour," the Viscount informed her as the last guests made their farewells. "My carriage is waiting. I trust you have packed appropriately for country life." "Yes, my lord," Violet replied, the new title still strange on her tongue. "Martha has prepared everything according to your instructions." "Good. And I have taken the liberty of dismissing your maid. My household staff will attend to your needs at Ironwood Hall." Violet's head snapped up in dismay. "But Martha has been with me since childhood." "And she proved her disloyalty quite thoroughly," he countered coldly. "Besides, as Viscountess Ironwood, you will have a proper lady's maid, not some groom's daughter playing at gentility." Before Violet could protest further, the Viscount turned to address his coachman about the journey ahead, leaving her to bid a tearful farewell to the last friendly face from her former life. "Be brave, miss, my lady," Martha whispered, pressing something into Violet's palm as they embraced. "And remember, not all prisons have visible bars." As the grand carriage bearing the Ironwood crest pulled away from London, Violet gazed out at the passing streets, committing to memory the city she might never see again. Only when they had reached the outskirts did she dare look at what Martha had given her, a small, worn book of poetry, Preston's favourite, with a pressed violet marking a page where he had once read to her on a summer afternoon. The Viscount, absorbed in some papers from his solicitor, did not notice the single tear that slid down his new wife's cheek, nor the way her fingers traced the dried flower before tucking the book safely into her reticule. Ironwood Hall loomed on the horizon just as twilight descended, a massive Tudor manor sprawling across the countryside of Derbyshire like a slumbering beast. As the carriage approached through a long avenue of ancient oaks, Violet felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Welcome to your new home, Viscountess," Lord Ironwood said, something like pride colouring his voice for the first time. 30 generations of Ironwoods have lived and died within these walls. "It is impressive," Violet offered, unable to summon greater enthusiasm for the forbidding stone edifice. A line of servants awaited them on the steps, arranged by rank from the imposing housekeeper at the top to the smallest scullery maid at the bottom. The Viscount helped Violet from the carriage with formal correctness, then presented her to the assembled staff. "This is your new mistress, Lady Ironwood," he announced. "You will afford her every respect due to her position." The servants bowed or curtsied as appropriate, their faces uniformly blank. Only the housekeeper, a severe-looking woman introduced as Mrs. Winters, offered any greeting beyond the most minimal. "Welcome to Ironwood Hall, my lady," she said, her voice as dry as autumn leaves. "Your chambers have been prepared according to his lordship's specifications." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters," Violet replied, striving for the dignity expected of her new role. "I look forward to becoming acquainted with the household." That can wait until tomorrow, the Viscount interrupted. Lady Ironwood must be fatigued from the journey. She will take a light supper in her rooms and retire early. It was not a suggestion. Violet found herself whisked through the cavernous great hall, up a grand staircase lined with portraits of deer-faced Ironwood ancestors, and into a suite of rooms decorated in shades of crimson and gold that echoed the ruby still weighing down her finger. "These were my mother's rooms," the Viscount explained, surveying the chambers with dispassionate eyes. "And my first wife's. They are now yours." "They are very grand," Violet said, running her fingers over the heavy brocade of the bed curtains. "I will join you at midnight," he stated matter-of-factly. "I trust you understand what is expected." Violet felt her cheeks flame but managed a slight nod. "Yes, my lord." "Good. Until then, make yourself comfortable. You are mistress here now, at least in name." With that parting comment, he left her alone in the oppressive grandeur of her new prison. A timid knock announced the arrival of her new lady's maid, a plain, mouse-like girl who introduced herself as Agnes. She helped Violet change from her traveling clothes into a nightgown and wrapper, then served a supper tray by the fire. "Is there anything else you require, my lady?" Agnes asked, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if expecting rebuke. "No, thank you, Agnes. You may go." Left alone at last, Violet wandered the suite, taking inventory of what was now supposedly hers. The sitting room with its heavy furniture and dark paneling. The dressing room with its massive wardrobes already filled with gowns she had not selected. And the bedroom dominated by the enormous four-poster bed where she would soon be expected to fulfill her primary duty as the Viscount's wife. As the mantel clock ticked inexorably toward midnight, Violet found herself drawn to the window. The moon had emerged from behind the clouds, illuminating the extensive grounds of Ironwood Hall, formal gardens nearest the house giving way to wild parkland and, in the distance, what appeared to be a small lake glittering like silver in the moonlight. So absorbed was she in this view that she did not immediately notice the scraping sound behind her. When she turned, she was startled to find a section of the wood paneling beside the fireplace had swung open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. And in the opening stood not the Viscount come to claim his husbandly rights, but a young woman in a simple dress, her golden hair falling in waves around a face marked by a vivid scar from temple to jaw. "Beg pardon, my lady," the stranger said, dropping a quick curtsy. "I didn't realize the room was occupied." The old Viscountess, she always rang before retiring, and she broke off, clearly flustered. "Forgive me. I'll go the long way round." "Wait!" Violet called as the woman began to retreat. "Who are you? What is this passage?" The scarred woman hesitated, then stepped fully into the room. "I'm Dora, my lady. I tend the west wing. This passage connects all the family apartments for the servants' use, to avoid disturbing the family in the main corridors." Violet approached the hidden door with curiosity. "I had no idea such a thing existed." "Most great houses have them, my lady. Though I'm surprised no one thought to tell you." Dora's expression suggested she wasn't surprised at all. "His lordship doesn't like the servants to be visible." "I see." Violet glanced at the clock. Only 15 minutes remained before the Viscount would arrive. "Dora, I know this is irregular, but might I ask you something?" The servant looked wary but nodded. "What was she like?" "The previous Lady Ironwood." Dora's hand unconsciously rose to touch the scar on her face. "Beautiful," she said softly. "Kind, when she could be. Afraid, most of the time." "And did she truly die in childbed?" A long silence followed before Dora replied, her voice barely audible. "That's what's written in the family Bible, my lady." The sound of footsteps in the corridor made them both start. "I must go," Dora whispered, slipping back into the passage. "Remember to lock the panel from your side, my lady. For privacy." Her eyes conveyed a message her words did not. The panel closed just as a knock sounded at the main door. Violet hastily turned the small hidden lock Dora had indicated, then called, "Enter," in a voice far steadier than she felt. The Viscount strode in, already in his dressing gown. "I see you are prepared," he observed, his cold eyes travelling over her nightgown-clad form. "Good. I despise unnecessary delay." As he approached the bed, Violet steeled herself for what was to come. She was a wife now, with a wife's duties. But as the Viscount reached for her, his hand freezing in mid-air, a tremendous crash sounded from somewhere below stairs. "What the devil?" he muttered, moving to the bell-pull. A footman appeared almost instantly. "What is that commotion?" "Fire in the kitchen, my lord," the man gasped. "Mrs. Winters requests your presence immediately, the flames are spreading to the east wing." With a curse, the Viscount turned to Violet. "Remain here. I will return once this is handled." He departed in a flurry of silk dressing gown and muttered imprecations. Violet sank onto the edge of the bed, relief washing over her like a wave. Reprieved, if only temporarily. As the sounds of shouting and running footsteps echoed through the great house, she found herself drawn once more to the hidden panel. What other secrets might Ironwood Hall contain? And what had truly happened to her predecessor? The clock struck midnight, and somewhere in the bowels of the manor, smoke rose to meet the watching moon. The fire, while dramatic, proved relatively minor, contained to the kitchen and a small portion of the servants' quarters. By morning, the household had settled into clean-up efforts, with the Viscount directing repairs from his study. The previous night's interrupted duties remained uncompleted, as Lord Ironwood had not returned to Violet's chambers. She wasn't sure if she should feel relieved or concerned about what this might portend for her marital future. After a solitary breakfast in her sitting room, Violet decided to explore her new domain. Agnes had informed her that the Viscount would be occupied with the fire damage all day, leaving her free to become acquainted with Ironwood Hall without his intimidating presence. The manor proved even larger than it had appeared from outside, a labyrinth of corridors, staircases, and chambers spanning centuries of architectural styles. The oldest section dated to Tudor times, while newer wings had been added by successive generations of Ironwoods, each leaving their mark on the estate. Violet wandered through grand reception rooms, a magnificent library where she lingered longest, formal dining chambers, and portrait galleries featuring stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her progress with disapproval. It was in the west wing, the least used portion of the house according to Agnes, that Violet found herself drawn to a small door half hidden behind a tapestry. Curious, she tried the handle, finding it unlocked. Beyond lay a charming circular room with windows on three sides, clearly designed as a lady's retreat. Unlike the oppressive grandeur of the main house, this space felt intimate, personal. A collection of watercolors adorned the walls, comfortable chairs invited relaxation, and bookshelves held volumes of poetry and novels rather than the leather-bound legal and historical tomes that dominated the main library. This was her sanctuary, came a voice from behind her. Violet turned to find Dora standing in the doorway, a feather duster in hand. "Lady Ironwood, the previous one?" Violet asked. Dora nodded, stepping into the room and running her fingers affectionately over the back of a chair. "Lady Catherine." She called this her thinking room. His lordship never came here, he considered watercolors and poetry beneath his dignity. Violet moved to examine the paintings more closely. They depicted scenes of the estate in different seasons, the lake in summer, the gardens in spring, the forest in autumn. Each was signed simply C.I. She painted these herself. She did. Lady Catherine was quite talented. These were the only things she was permitted to keep from her life before marriage. Permitted? Violet echoed, turning to face the servant. Dora's expression grew guarded. His lordship has firm ideas about a wife's proper focus. As I'm learning, Violet murmured. She moved to the bookshelf, noticing a volume of Wordsworth with a ribbon marking a page. Was she happy here, Dora? The servant busied herself with dusting, avoiding Violet's gaze. It's not my place to speak of such things, my lady. Please, Violet urged. I have no friends here, no allies. I need to understand what kind of man I've married. Dora hesitated, then set down her duster. Lady Catherine came here much as you did, young, beautiful, from a family that needed the connection. At first, she tried to please him, to be the perfect Viscountess. But nothing was ever good enough. What happened? His lordship, when he is displeased, he makes his displeasure known. Dora's hand unconsciously rose to the scar on her face. Lady Catherine bore it as long as she could. When she finally conceived, we all hoped it might soften him. But it didn't, Violet guessed, a chill settling in her bones. No, my lady. It made him more possessive, more controlling. She wasn't permitted to leave her rooms in the final months. No visitors, not even her sister. And she died in childbirth. Dora's eyes filled with tears. She died. The child with her. That's all I should say, my lady. Before Violet could press further, a shadow fell across the doorway. Both women turned to find Mrs. Winters standing there, her severe expression even more forbidding than usual. Dora, you are needed in the East Gallery, the housekeeper said coldly. And my lady, his lordship has been asking for you. He is in his study. Dora bobbed a curtsy and fled, leaving Violet alone with the imposing housekeeper. I would advise caution, Lady Ironwood, Mrs. Winters said once Dora was gone. This house has ears in every wall, and his lordship does not appreciate curiosity in his wife. I was merely exploring my new home, Violet replied, lifting her chin. Indeed. Well, perhaps your explorations would be better directed toward more appropriate areas of the house. The still room, perhaps, or the linen closets. Mrs. Winters' thin lips curved in what might charitably be called a smile. Now, if you'll follow me, his lordship awaits. As Violet followed the housekeeper through the maze of corridors, she could not shake the feeling that she had just received both a warning and a threat. The Viscount's study was a masculine domain of dark wood, leather, and hunting trophies, stags' heads and foxes' tails mounted as grim reminders of his prowess. Lord Ironwood himself sat behind an enormous desk, his quill scratching against parchment as he tallied the costs of the previous night's fire. Ah, Lady Ironwood, he said without looking up. I trust you have been familiarizing yourself with the house. Yes, my lord. It is most impressive. I've been informed you were exploring the West Wing. Specifically, my first wife's private sitting room. Now he did look up, his grey eyes cold as January frost. Violet felt a flash of indignation. Had Mrs. Winters rushed to report her movements? Or were there indeed ears in every wall as the housekeeper had suggested? I was admiring Lady Catherine's watercolours, she replied carefully. She was quite talented. She wasted time on frivolities when she should have been attending to her duties as Viscountess. His tone made it clear what he considered those duties to be. I would prefer you not to make the same mistake. I assure you, I have no talent for watercolours, Violet said, attempting to lighten the moment. The Viscount did not smile. I have prepared a schedule for you, he continued, sliding a sheet of paper across the desk. It outlines your daily responsibilities, household accounts, menu planning, correspondence, needlework. There is little time for idle wandering. Violet scanned the document, noting that every hour of her day had been accounted for, from breakfast until bedtime. Even her reading was prescribed, household management texts and improving sermons rather than novels or poetry. I see, she said, folding the paper carefully. And when might I be permitted to visit the village? Or perhaps receive visitors? The village holds nothing of interest, and as for visitors, he waved a dismissive hand, the local society is painfully provincial. In any case, you will be too occupied with household matters for social calls. I see, Violet repeated, understanding all too clearly what was happening. Like Catherine before her, she was to be isolated, controlled, molded to the Viscount's specifications. There is one more matter, Lord Ironwood said, setting down his quill. Last night's interruption was unfortunate. I expect you in my chambers tonight at 10 o'clock. We will not be disturbed again. Violet felt her cheeks flush but managed a composed nod. As you wish, my lord. That will be all. He returned to his ledgers, dismissing her as one might dismiss a servant. As Violet made her way back to her chambers, the enormity of her situation settled upon her like a shroud. She was mistress of a great estate yet prisoner within its walls. Wife to a powerful man yet powerless herself. And somewhere within these ancient stones lay the truth of what had happened to Catherine, the previous Lady Ironwood, a truth that might well foretell Violet's own fate. The days fell into a monotonous rhythm. Violet rose each morning, attended to the household tasks prescribed by her husband, took meals either alone or in frigid silence with the Viscount, and endured his perfunctory visits to her bedchamber every third night. If the union bore fruit, he showed no particular interest beyond clinical inquiry. The one unexpected blessing was the secret passages. Violet had discovered that the network of hidden corridors connected not just the family apartments but most of the main house. Through careful exploration during moments when she could evade Mrs. Winter's watchful eye, she mapped these secret thoroughfares in her mind, finding they offered both privacy and freedom of movement the Viscount had not anticipated restricting. It was during one such clandestine exploration, nearly a month into her marriage, that Violet stumbled upon something extraordinary. Following a narrow passage that descended below the main floor, she found herself emerging into what appeared to be an old priest hole, a hidden chamber dating from times when Catholic clergy needed concealment from persecution. But this priest hole had been converted to another purpose. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with volumes the Viscount would surely disapprove of, novels, poetry, journals, and slim volumes with foreign titles. A small desk held writing materials, and a comfortable chair sat beneath a narrow window that admitted just enough light to read by. Most remarkable of all was the journal that lay open on the desk, its pages covered in a delicate, feminine hand. Violet lifted it with trembling fingers and read, April 15th, 1812 *. Another day of confinement. It says the child requires my constant rest, but I know the truth, he cannot bear the thought of others seeing my condition, as if my swollen belly would somehow reveal his own part in creating it. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so maddening. **** Mr. P. smuggled in the new Radcliffe novel yesterday via Dora. Such small rebellions keep me sane in this gilded cage. He would be furious if he knew I still read such nonsense, but what he doesn't know sustains me. **** The child moved vigorously today. A girl, I'm certain, though he demands a son. Heaven help the poor creature either way, born into this household with such a father. ***. Violet's heart raced as she realized what she had found, Catherine's secret refuge, and with it, her private thoughts. Turning to the final entry with trepidation, she read, June 3rd, 1812 ***. The pains began last night. He refuses to send for my sister, insisting his own physician is sufficient. I fear what's to come, not the pain of childbirth, which every woman must face, but what follows after. He spoke again of schools abroad for sons and strict governance for daughters. ***. I cannot, will not, allow any child of mine to endure what I have. If the worst should happen, I have made arrangements through Mr. P. My instructions are hidden where only a woman's eyes would think to look. ***. Should another unfortunate bride find herself in my position, may she discover what I learned too late. The walls of Ironwood Hall contain passages, secrets, and perhaps even escape. The journal ended there. Violet closed it gently, her mind racing. Who was Mr. P? What arrangements had Catherine made? And most importantly, where had she hidden her instructions? Where only a woman's eyes would think to look, Violet murmured to herself, glancing around the hidden room. Not here. This chamber, while secret, could potentially be discovered by anyone who knew of the passages. It would have to be somewhere more intimate. A thought struck her. Catherine's private sitting room, the thinking room as Dora had called it. A place the Viscount never entered because he considered its contents beneath his dignity. With renewed purpose, Violet carefully replaced the journal and slipped back into the passage, making her way toward the west wing. The sitting room was deserted when she arrived, golden afternoon light streaming through the windows to illuminate the watercolors on the walls. Violet studied them with fresh eyes, wondering if they contained some clue. Each painting was lovely but revealed nothing unusual upon careful inspection. Her gaze traveled to the bookshelf. Where only a woman's eyes would think to look, she repeated softly. What would a woman notice that a man like the Viscount would overlook? The answer came suddenly, the volume of Wordsworth she had noticed on her first visit, with its ribbon marker. Violet pulled it from the shelf and opened it to the marked page. There, in the margins of "She dwelt among the untrodden ways," were tiny pencil notations, not notes about the poem, but what appeared to be a cipher. Heart-pounding, Violet examined the markings more closely. Letters had been subtly underlined throughout the poem, forming a message when read in sequence: * altar cloth third from left embroidered initials pattern contains truth * altar cloth. Violet frowned in concentration. The chapel, of course. Ironwood Hall contained a private chapel in the east wing, used by generations of the family for christenings, weddings, and funerals. She had glimpsed it during her initial exploration but had not entered, finding the door locked at the time. A glance at the mantel clock showed nearly 4 o'clock. She was expected at tea with the vicar's wife in 30 minutes, one of the few social obligations the Viscount permitted as appropriately dignified. There was no time to investigate the chapel now, but tomorrow, perhaps, when Lord Ironwood rode out to inspect the tenant farms. The sound of footsteps in the corridor forced Violet to hastily replace the book and assume an attitude of casual admiration for the watercolors. A moment later, Dora appeared in the doorway. "My lady, Mrs. Winters has been looking for you. The vicar's wife has arrived early for tea." "Thank you, Dora. I was just admiring Lady Catherine's artwork again." Violet moved toward the door, then paused. "Dora, who is Mr. P?" The maid's face drained of color. "I don't know what you mean, my lady." "I think you do," Violet said gently. "I found Catherine's journal. She mentioned someone called Mr. P who helped her." Dora glanced nervously into the corridor before stepping closer, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Phillips, my lady. The apothecary in the village. He was kind to Lady Catherine during her confinement." "I see. And does he still reside in the village?" "Yes, my lady. His shop is on the high street, beside the milliner's." Dora hesitated. "But I wouldn't mention his name to his lordship. There was talk after Lady Catherine died. Nothing improper, mind you, just kindness on Mr. Phillips' part, but his lordship was very angry nonetheless." "Thank you, Dora. I'll remember that." As Violet endured tea with the pinch-faced vicar's wife, a woman clearly handpicked by the Viscount for her tedious conversation and rigid propriety, her mind raced with possibilities. Tomorrow she would find a way to examine the altar cloth in the chapel, and perhaps discover what truth Catherine had hidden there. For the first time since her wedding day, Violet felt something like hope stir within her breast. If Catherine had found ways to rebel against her confinement, perhaps Violet could do the same. And if Catherine had planned some form of escape, even if she had not lived to execute it herself. Violet's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the Viscount himself, joining them unexpectedly for tea. "My dear," he said, his tone conveying possession rather than affection, "I trust you are entertaining Mrs. Raleigh adequately." "Lady Ironwood is a most attentive hostess," the vicar's wife simpered. "We were just discussing the parish poor box and her ladyship's potential contribution." "Indeed." The Viscount's cold eye settled on Violet. "My wife's charitable inclinations must, of course, be directed through proper channels. The vicar has my full confidence in such matters." The underlying message was clear: Violet would not be permitted independent access even to her pin money. Any charity would be dispensed under strict supervision. "Of course, my lord," she replied, lowering her eyes as expected. "I defer to your greater experience in such matters." Something in her tone must have alerted him, for the Viscount studied her face with unusual intensity. "You seem animated today, my dear. Has something occurred to brighten your spirits?" "Fresh air and exercise, perhaps," Violet offered with a practiced smile. "I walked in the rose garden this morning." "How lovely," Mrs. Raleigh declared. "Though one must be careful of too much sun, it can lead to freckles, and nothing ruins a lady's complexion faster." The conversation devolved into banalities about weather and complexions, but Violet remained uncomfortably aware of her husband's scrutiny throughout. When Mrs. Raleigh finally departed, the Viscount detained Violet with a hand on her arm. "You will join me for dinner tonight," he said. "I have news to share." "News, my lord?" "Yes. It seems we may expect an addition to our household in approximately 7 months' time, according to Dr. Green's calculations." Violet's hand flew to her abdomen. "I'm with child." "So it appears." The Viscount's expression remained unchanged, though his grip on her arm tightened slightly. "You will, of course, adjust your activities accordingly. No more walks in the garden, the gravel paths are too uneven. No exertion of any kind, in fact. Dr. Green will provide a complete regimen for your confinement." "Confinement? But it's only just begun, surely there's no need for such restrictions so early." "I will not risk the Ironwood air," he replied coldly. "You will follow Dr. Green's instructions to the letter. Is that understood?" In that moment, Catherine's journal entries took on new and terrible meaning. Violet saw with perfect clarity the prison that was being constructed around her, one that would only grow more restrictive as her pregnancy advanced. "Yes, my lord," she murmured, lowering her eyes to hide the rebellion sparking there. "I understand perfectly."